Hello, 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 lovelies, and welcome back to another episode of Ask Miss Jai Live. I am so excited to be coming to you this Sunday evening. Tonight's episode, we'll be talking about how to discuss role playing in relationships. So, how we can discuss role playing, how we can bring it up with a partner, some things for us to keep in mind in order to make sure that we have an enjoyable time, but that we're also respecting our boundaries and what we're looking for. So stick around and learn a little bit more about role playing in relationships and what that can look like. If you are joining us live, please feel free to put a hashtag live in the comments. If you're catching this on the replay, go ahead and put a hashtag replay. And please include what you found most useful or helpful or interesting from this. I'd love to hear from folks around what they enjoy about these shows. So my name is Miss Jai. I am very excited to be here and to be providing this information. I use feminine and masculine pronouns, so she, her, or he, him. Feeling a little bit more butch today, clearly by shorts and a t-shirt in this winter weather. So I'm very excited to be here to be discussing role playing and what this can look like for us. So one of the things that came up and one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about role playing is that sometimes there is this perception of like, why role play? Why would we want to pretend that we are someone other than who we are, especially in a sexual situation or when engaging with partners? And there's a couple of things that I would like us to think about. So we might have a lot of reasons for why we would want to potentially role play. It could be a way for us to give up some control. So if we are folks that in our everyday lives, we feel like we have to be in control all the time, we have to take on multiple projects. Maybe we are juggling a lot of work or professional duties. Then role playing and giving up control in a role playing scenario can be an opportunity for us to sort of relinquish that, turn our brains off, not have to be the one in control for that moment. But for those of us who are trans and non-binary, role playing is also an opportunity for us to explore and feel affirmed in our gender, especially as we are exploring what our gender identity or expression can look like for us. So it could be that we are maybe trying on a name or trying on a pronoun, and by role playing, we're able to sort of sit or fit into this mold that helps us to see if this is something that feels right for us or feels accurate for us. It could be also an opportunity for us to sort of like step away from our bodies or the way that we have been perceived in the past. So if we are someone who if I'm someone who finds it difficult to be present in my body, role playing can be a way for me to still engage in sex, still engage in the flirtatious and the fun portions without that those feelings of anxiety or nervousness that can happen for me in my everyday life. It could be a way for me to sort of compartmentalize it or say, like, this is a way that I feel comfortable because when I am a maid, I am not myself, or when I am a hitchhiker, that I'm not myself, or when I am more masculine, or when I'm role playing as a boy, or I'm role playing as a girl. So the ways that we role play gender in those spaces can be ways that feel very affirming as well. And then for some folks, there are also ways that we might role play that allow us the opportunity to release some of the anxieties we have around ever making a mistake or ever making a misstep. And so we might hold on to all of this like tightly woundness around it. And role playing can be a way for us to sort of let go of some of those pieces. So whatever brings you to role playing, and there are lots of reasons why we may come to role playing, there are some things that we want to keep in mind in terms of how we are setting up a scene and how we are talking about this with our partner or partners. So the first thing is that before we even get into what a role play could look like, it's helpful for us to determine what our safe word is going to be and what our boundaries are around the role playing that we're going to be engaging in. Because even if we have every piece sort of mapped out in our mind, even if we are like, oh, I've done this 100 times before, or I'm really familiar with role playing, we could have things come to the surface for us that we are unfamiliar with, or we could have things bubble to the surface for us that are really intense, even if they are unpredictable. And so having that safe word ready for us so that we can stop what's happening in the moment can be a really helpful way to sort of make sure that you are for ourselves, make sure that we are um, providing some protection for ourselves, but also for our partners. It means that we know that if something is going in a direction that they don't want or that feels harmful, that our partner is going to let us know. So it also assures some of our potential anxiety around, am I doing too much? Am I acting too hard for this amazing acting challenge? Am I acting too hard? Having that safe word gives us the opportunity to know that there's a way for both of us to advocate for our needs. And then also knowing what our boundaries are. So part of this is bringing up what we want to role play, deciding on what we want to role play together. So if a partner brings up to you that they were wanting to role play in a certain way, and that way makes you feel uncomfortable, or it feels like it might be icky, or to you, or that it's bringing up some sort of like bristling feeling, then it's important that we talk about that, because that likely means that there is some boundary there around the role play that's going to be happening, if it is even going to be happening. But similarly, we have to be prepared for boundaries from our partners to be expressed as well, and provide the opportunity for us to negotiate and modify what's taking place. So I might want to role play a power dynamic with someone. I might say, oh, I really find it very sexy for me to be the boss and you be the employee, or something of that nature. So we're role playing a power dynamic. We're role playing as people that we aren't. However, if my partner says to me, well, that's actually something I'm really uncomfortable with, actually, that power dynamic makes me really uncomfortable, then it's important for me to listen to those boundaries that are happening and maybe tweak it. So if that is the power dynamic that's uncomfortable, what about it is uncomfortable? Is it the setup that it's a boss and an employee? Is it the setup that there is a power dynamic? Would it be more comfortable if it was a different power dynamic? So like a dominant and a sub? Would it be more comfortable if there wasn't a power dynamic? So let's say we're two employees that are on a work trip together. So there's lots of ways that we can then start to nuance what feels comfortable in that situation. So knowing what our boundaries are ahead of time, or like thinking for ourselves, what might my boundaries be around role playing, but also as you start to feel them in the moment coming up, expressing those. Because and also being receptive to those boundaries. Because the other thing is that we don't want to get into a situation where we know a boundary is already going to be crossed and now we're experiencing it being crossed, if we can avoid it. Sometimes boundaries are crossed and we aren't even aware that those are boundaries in the before we got into that situation. And that's why having a safe word can be super helpful, because when that boundary is crossed, then we can be really clear around it. Again, deciding what to role play together is a way for us to avoid a lot of that guesswork, because we don't want to make assumptions around what is going to be enjoyable, because what's enjoyable for me might not be enjoyable for my partner or partners, or what's enjoyable for me may be enjoyable, but in a different way or a different setting. The other thing is we can start small, right? So I jumped to boss and employee, or two employees on a work trip, but we can start small with role play. So we can start with, oh, we're just meeting up at a bar and you're a stranger and I think you're cute. Or it can be small little role plays like, if we go back to boss and employee, then it could be, oh, my employee is delivering my coffee for me, or something of that nature. It doesn't need to be these big, grand role plays, as we're getting comfortable with what this feels like for us. So starting small can be really helpful in that way. And it also takes off some of the pressure of having to give an Oscar-worthy performance, because some folks might get really into role play and they might be like, yeah, this is totally it for me. But for a lot of us, it feels awkward at first and a little uncomfortable and a little challenging to get into the midst of it. And that really brings me to the next point, which is that like it's okay to feel silly when we're role playing, or as we're learning how to role play. Part of what I hope to infuse in the sexual health information and in the relationship health information that I give is that we're awkward human beings. And in a lot of ways, we might feel a little silly in how we are engaging with one another. We might have even like logistically uncomfortable things happen, like, oh, like you're on my hair and I'm trying to move while we're in bed together, or there's too much lube and now I feel super slick, or all sorts of other logistical things. But in role playing, we're adding this element of additional pressure to perform. And so starting small can be helpful with that, but also know that like there are going to be times when you feel a little silly. And so sometimes naming the feeling a little silly can actually help to just move through that, so you're not feeling as silly as into what is happening. So naming that can be helpful as well. And also, if it gets too off the rails or off track, then you can say, okay, let's start over. Or, okay, let's pivot and do this different thing instead. Or maybe the moment is gone and we just need to stop for now altogether. Changing locations can also sometimes help with that feeling silly as well. So let's say you are trying to do this role play and you only are having sexual activity in a bedroom. If you're trying to do, like I said before, like a boss and employee role play or something of that nature, changing a location in the home can be helpful as well. So maybe instead of trying to role play in the bedroom, we say, let's just try role playing starting in the office, since that's the setting that might set the mood for the scenario that I gave before. Or it could be, let's start with, we're going to go out to a restaurant, or we're going to go out to a bar and drive separately and meet there separately as just strangers meeting for the first time. So there's a lot of ways that we can change the setting of where we're engaging in role play that can help us to get into that mood and push through some of that silly feeling as well. The only thing that I would say around changing location as well is just being really mindful of where you're going to be engaging in sexual activity, because though it might feel comfortable for us to maybe change the setting to a public location where we're like beginning this role play, we may feel uncomfortable with engaging in sex publicly, or there might be concern around the legality of public sex. And so being mindful of like where these things are going to take place, or how we might have these like pressure or these trigger points of like, okay, we're going to move this to going back to your place or something of that nature. And then it's also really helpful for us to think about our headspace as well. So headspace is a term that's used for folks, for a variety of folks, but like it's the way that we get into this like mindset or this mind frame of engaging in play or engaging in a scene, a kink scene or a fetish scene. So it could be that a power dynamic is taking place. So getting into the headspace of I'm going to be dominant now, or I'm going to be submissive now. Getting into a kink scene, it could be getting into a headspace like there is like impact play happening. So like I'm going to be flogging someone, or I'm going to be flogged. So getting ourselves into this headspace can be really important in the ways that we're wanting to engage. And in role playing, it's similar. So I would encourage us, especially for other folks who are part of the kink community, who think about headspace as like a dominance or submission, or as engaging in these certain kink or fetish ways. It's helpful for us to maybe think of role playing as a headspace as well, because we are taking on this persona of sorts. And even if we're starting small, we can still get into this mindset for ourselves of like, okay, now I am an employee, now I am a boss, now I am a dominant, now I am a sub. Or now I am a stranger, I'm meeting for the first time. These can be helpful ways for us to, again, sort of like step outside of ourselves. And as trans and non-binary people, having the opportunity to get into a headspace, especially as we're exploring gender, as we're exploring pronouns, as we're exploring what this can look like, as I mentioned at the beginning, it can be helpful for us to shift our headspace, or to think about the headspace that we're currently in, because it gives us the opportunity to explore what kinds of role plays we want to do, and gives us the opportunity to then shift that as to something that feels good for us as well. And then at any time, it's also okay for us to stop. So let's say I am interested in role playing as a femme. I want to role play as like a hyper femme stranger that you're meeting at a bar. And I get into the midst of it and I'm actually really uncomfortable. Maybe we selected a location that doesn't feel super safe, or we showed up and someone acted out and said something really shitty the first thing I did when I entered the bar, right? So there can be a lot of factors that are happening externally that are outside of our control. And so if something like that were to happen, I might no longer feel like I'm on board for like sexy time to happen or to continue in this role play, right? Because I've already got this maybe like this dread I'm holding on to, or it's really hard for me to get into the headspace. And so making sure that we are comfortable that and we've discussed ahead of time that when we need to stop, we can stop. And also knowing for ourselves that if you need to stop in the moment, that it's okay, you can stop. Because it's not the last time that you're potentially going to role play, and you have more, we have more time. We have more time to explore what this looks like. It could be like, hey, I need to take a pause so I can just get through this feeling and tell you about this thing that happened, and then I'll be on board again. Or it might be that, like, you know what, tonight actually is not going to work for me. And so we have the right to say, like, it's no longer working for any reason that comes up. Again, we need to be consenting to the ways that we're wanting to role play. And that means that giving the opportunity for us to expand and explore in ways that feel safe and comfortable and risk aware for us as well. And then as always, with any sort of like engagement and something that you're going outside of your comfort zone in, or even if role playing is very much in your comfort zone, giving the opportunity for aftercare is super important for everyone who's involved. So aftercare for folks who might be, if you're engaging in power play, role play, aftercare for submissives, but also aftercare for dominance, the opportunity to sort of come back and recenter ourselves is super important. And so that can look like things like running a hot bath, or getting in really cozy clothes, or cuddling for a while, or if you haven't eaten anything or had any water in a while, then getting a snack and some water. It could be putting on some calm music. I personally love lo-fi beats. I can't stop talking about them. This is not an advertisement for lo-fi beats, but they do something for me that helps me feel really calm and collected and centered. It could be things like doing a visualization or a meditation. It could be doing a breathing exercise. It could be sitting around and giggling about what just occurred and what was going on in the scene, or what was going on in the role play. So giving the opportunity for aftercare helps us to come back to center so that we are able to feel grounded, regrounded again, especially if we've been role playing something that's very, very different than who we are. But it also gives us an opportunity to get feedback. So when doing aftercare or just aftercare, I always encourage folks to ask, like, what did you like about what we did? What didn't you like, or what would you change about what we did? Is there something that you would like to see different? Is there something that you would like to see more of? Is this sparking other curiosity or interests for you? Can we explore those the next time we play around? So it gives us an opportunity to provide our feedback and also receive feedback in a way that is loving and centered and careful for our relationship. Cared for, not careful, but also careful for our relationship. So giving the opportunity for feedback, but also being open to receiving feedback after aftercare can be super helpful. And then with anything, with role playing, but with any sort of kink or fetish, I think it's also important for us to recognize when something doesn't work for us. So maybe we've given it the college try a couple of times, and we still are deciding, like, you know what, that role play actually is just not working for me. I actually don't enjoy dressing up like a maid. I don't enjoy putting like a French maid specifically, because that's generally what I see in terms of like dress up and things like that. I actually really don't enjoy doing that, or I don't like role playing where there's some feeling of like subservience, like it just feels really uncomfortable for me. And I've tried it a couple of times and it's just really not working out for me. That's okay as well. So this is an opportunity for us to learn more about ourselves, what things fire our switches, flip our switches, all these metaphors, what things flip our switches, what things don't flip our switches, or what things turn us off completely, right? This is an opportunity for us to learn more about that, and learn more about that with our partners in safe and collected ways. So some of the things in terms of our health that I'd encourage us to think about, or considerations around role playing, is where are you going to be role playing? Are there any considerations for things like what you're going to be wearing? So are you going to be role playing outdoors and it's the middle of winter? Then you should probably be wearing some sort of clothing that is going to be appropriate for your body so you don't get hypothermia or a cold or things like that. what kind of role play are you engaging in? Is there any sort of physical aspect to it? Are you going to have the opportunity for things like water or snacks? If you're doing role playing, let's say you're doing like really intense houseboy role playing, where there's also like a component of being kenneled or locked up or something of that nature. Will you have the opportunity to stretch your legs? Will you have the opportunity to get up and move around? Are you going to be stuck in one position for a very long time? Have you been in that position for a long time in the past? And have you needed anything around that? So like, does your back start to seize up? Do you need ibuprofen as part of your aftercare? Are there considerations for your health to keep in mind? So these are all ways that we can think about the kinds of role play that we engage in, and also some of the health considerations that we might have. And then the other thing I think about as well, and I mentioned this before, is that if we're engaging in anything publicly, that we are aware of what like legalities might be present, right? So if we're engaging in public play as part of our role play, are we doing that in a space that welcomes and supports sexual activity? Or are we going somewhere and doing that somewhere where it's not supportive, where there's the potential for arrest or the potential for citation? And what does that mean when we put ourselves in that kind of risk? And how can we reduce the harm as much as possible in doing that? So finding places that are semi-private, finding places that are sex positive, places that support sexual activity, like bathhouses or or nude resorts or things of that nature that encourage sexual activity. So like finding those places can sometimes be helpful if we're wanting to engage in that way, while also reducing the risk as much as possible for some of those things like the legal ramifications. So all of those would be the health considerations that I would put out for role playing. But one of the biggest things is just like talking about this with our partners. And it might be something as simple as saying like, hey, I saw Ask Miss Jai live and they mentioned role playing. And, I've always been thinking about X, Y, or Z thing. What do you think about that? So use me as the reason that this is being brought up in your relationships. Because if we don't start talking about it, then the need won't necessarily go met. It won't necessarily be met. And so one of the ways that we can start having these needs met for us is by having those conversations and starting those conversations. And I will say sometimes the fantasy is a lot hotter than the reality of it as well. So we might get in the midst of it and it might get really goofy and giggly. And we might be like, you know what, the fantasy is super hot, but the logistics of us trying to role play this is just not the business, or it's just not realistic. And that's also okay. So this is an opportunity for us to explore all the ways that we might be experiencing our relationships, all the ways that we might be experiencing sex and sexual activity. And role playing can also be really hot in a non-sexual way as well. So it could be really exciting to step out as a persona for ourselves, to be creative in what that looks like for ourselves, and to support the ability for us to do that in loving, affirming ways while still being in these relationships as well. So I want to thank you for joining. If you are interested in learning more about role playing or sexual health or ways to engage that are exciting and new and sexy, please feel free to follow me on Instagram at Ask Miss Jai. Follow me on LinkedIn or on the Facebook group Ask Miss Jai under Ask Miss Jai, or on our YouTube channel at Ask Miss Jai as well. We will be moving over the Instagram lives to YouTube. So you will still get a video on Sunday. It just won't be live on Sundays. The logistics of this makes it all very difficult. So we're going to be moving everything to a multi-streaming platform. And unfortunately, that doesn't support Instagram. So we will still go live on Instagram every now and again, but mostly we'll be posting the update videos every Sunday. And then also, please feel free to follow us on, or follow me and join our newsletter. Go to www.askmissjai.com. And at the bottom, you can join the newsletter. The newsletter, every week, we send out a newsletter that includes a gratitude, 1 or 2 announcements about Ask Miss Jai Live, and a resource that you can use, or that if you are a health provider, your patients or clients can use. To support our trans and non-binary identities. So things like binders and tucking panties and financial aid support and programs that are providing services nationwide. So please check that out and join our newsletter or join my newsletter. And again, I'm so grateful and excited to be here and to keep bringing this to you every week. Again, my name is Miss Jai. I use feminine and masculine pronouns. I'm the host of Ask Miss Jai Live. And thank you all for being here today. And thank you for investing in the health and wellness of trans and non-binary people. Have a wonderful Sunday.